What are you doing? Stop it. My son shook off my arm and ran into the yard. There were several fist-sized stones scattered around, thrown in by my mother-in-law, Sarah, out of spite. They were piled up in the corner of the yard, and I didn't know how to dispose of them. What did my hungry son see them as? He picked up one of the stones lying around and was about to put it in his mouth. Panicked, I tried to stop him, staggering as I stood up. I hadn't eaten properly for days, so I had no strength. My husband was gone. He died in a car accident, and since then we had no income, barely scraping by. Even if I wanted to work, my frail body couldn't handle a regular job. No, right now my son is the priority. If I don't hurry, he'll eat the stone. I cursed my helplessness. It's my fault that I let my child get so hungry that he tried to eat a stone. It's all my fault. I'm a failure as a mother. Overcome with self-blame, frustration, and sadness, tears wouldn't stop flowing. Stop. Please, stop. I desperately grabbed his hand. But to my surprise, my son was looking at the stone with sparkling eyes and was munching on it as if it were delicious.
Mom, this is yummy.
I was astonished by the unbelievable sight. My name is Melissa Adams. I live with my young son, Sean.
Mom, look. A dandelion.
Sean laughed innocently, pointing at a dandelion blooming in the park. Sean turned 4 this year and will start preschool next spring. The thought of that made me anxious. Enrolling him and buying the necessary supplies would cost money, but we had no income. Normally, I take a part-time job, but my weak health made it hard to work. And there was no one to watch Sean while I was working. As I watched my child play on the park slide, I wondered what to do next. My husband, Mike, died in a car accident last year. I still vividly remember that day, with the sun shining brightly, just like today. We were out shopping with Sean in a stroller, the 3 of us together. After finishing our shopping, we walked to the crosswalk. The light turned green, and we started to cross when a car came speeding towards us.
Watch out.
Mike pushed me and the stroller aside to protect us. The car screeched to a halt, and the area was immediately in chaos. Someone called an ambulance, and Mike, carried away with blaring sirens, was in critical condition. I waited with a prayerful heart, but he never came back. The police investigation concluded that the driver ran the red light. Sean probably still doesn't understand that his father is gone. Seeing his innocent eyes looking at me made my heart ache. I have to take care of Sean properly. I vowed to myself looking at Mike's portrait. But in reality, we were barely managing, using up the money Mike had saved while he was alive. I considered applying for welfare, but was denied because of our savings and owning a house. The official coldly told me, "You're still young and can work. Don't rely on us." My mother-in-law, Sarah, had been hostile to me ever since Mike's death.
It's your fault for being so careless.
Other relatives defended me, saying, "It's clearly the driver's fault for running the red light." But because my husband died protecting Sean and me, Sarah believes we are the ones to blame. I couldn't entirely dismiss that thought either. I kept thinking if only I had checked the safety more carefully, or if we had shopped a little longer. Sometimes I even regret going out that day at all.
Apologize. Apologize to Mike.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. For a few months after my husband died, she came almost every month and demanded apologies from Sean and me. But after 6 months, she started throwing stones instead.
I hate you.
With a shrill scream, Sarah would throw stones from her house. Our houses were next to each other, and stones the size of fists would fly from her yard. When I went outside to ask her to stop, more stones were thrown at me. Some of them were aimed directly at me, and if I couldn't dodge them, they would hit my face or body. Sarah, please stop. Ouch. I instinctively covered my face with my hands, and a sharp pain shot through. A stone hit the back of my hand, leaving a small cut. Startled, I looked around. I was worried Sean might have been hit, but thankfully he wasn't outside today. Relieved, I sighed. The rain of stones had stopped, and various sizes of stones were scattered in the yard. Sean and I picked them up one by one and piled them in a corner out of the way. The pile had grown to be as tall as Sean. This is a problem, I muttered, staring at the pile of stones. Lately, I have been cutting down my meals to 2 a day and trying to keep my stomach growling. I had to find a way out of this poverty. Even a little income would help, allowing me to save some money. Checking the decreasing balance in my bank account filled me with anxiety, but it would be slightly better with some savings. The other problem was Sarah. For some reason, she obsessively threw stones at us, and it was always near the end of the month. She must hate us, but this was excessive. It was a miracle Sean hadn't been hit yet, but who knew when he might get hurt? I want her to stop, but going over to ask would only result in more stones being thrown. She wouldn't listen to me. Even if I go to ask her, she won't listen to me. It's like making myself a target on purpose. I wish someone could mediate for us. One day, while I was thinking about this, Sean spoke up.
Hey, what about Jake?
I was momentarily puzzled. Jake? Who's that?
Jake, you know. He gave me piggyback rides. We found a tall elephant by the river together,
Sean said, but I had no idea what he was talking about. I thought it must be an imaginary friend. Children's imagination is so charming, I thought, and let it go. But a few days later, I remembered Jake Sawyer, a mutual friend of my husband and I. A few months before Mike died, we had gone to the zoo together. He loved kids, and he gave Sean a piggyback ride and chatted with him in the elephant area. There was a small water hole for the elephants, and Sean had called it a river. I remember how everyone burst out laughing at Sean's words, not yet able to distinguish between a river and a water hole. That's right, maybe I should talk to Jake. I knew it was presumptuous, but I had no one else to rely on. I gathered my courage and sent him a message. A few weeks later, Sean, Jake, and I met at a family restaurant. It was the first time seeing Jake since my husband's funeral.
I was surprised. I never expected to hear from you, Melissa.
He was dressed in chinos and a neat black shirt, smiling as he spoke. His hair, which had been straight the last time we met, was now permed. Thank you for taking the time to meet us.
Oh, no need to be so formal. Sean, you can order whatever you like.
Really? Then I'll have this, and this, and this.
Sean eagerly opened the menu and pointed at random items. Jake chuckled and suggested a sundae. With brownies, chocolate ice cream, whipped cream, and lots of chocolate, Sean's eyes lit up.
Oh, I'll have this.
No, Sean, stop. I tried to intervene, but Jake quickly ordered through the touch panel.
It's fine. I'll cover it.
I felt incredibly embarrassed and wanted to hide. While we chatted about recent events, the chocolate sundae arrived in front of Sean. Jake took it from the serving robot and handed it to Sean, then looked at me seriously.
So, you mentioned you needed to consult about something.
Feeling uneasy about his slightly defensive posture, I told him about Sarah. Meanwhile, Sean, with chocolate all around his mouth, was enjoying the sundae. After I finished, Jake pursed his lips, looking troubled.
I see. That's quite perplexing.
I want to know how to make her stop. Can you help me?
Well, I do know Mike's mom, but I'm not sure.
His reluctance was expected. No one wants to get involved in someone else's family problems. He might end up being targeted by stones too. But I couldn't give up here. I have no one else to turn to. Please, I beg you. Jake folded his arms and thought for a moment. At that moment, for some reason, Sean, holding a spoon, said, "Please." He probably didn't understand the meaning or the situation. Maybe he was just mimicking me, but he gave Jake an oddly serious look. After a brief silence, Jake burst out laughing.
Sean, you look just like your dad.
Caught off guard, I stammered. Oh well, people often say that.
Seeing Sean reminded me. I owe Mike.
Jake explained that when he and my husband worked at the same company, he had once made a huge mistake in a deal. Jake had intended to submit his resignation to his boss. But to his surprise, the boss already knew about it and didn't blame Jake.
I later found out that Mike had covered for me.
My husband had a good track record and a close relationship with his boss, so he wasn't reprimanded.
Mike was always putting himself out there for others. I still owe him.
He looked straight at me. His expression seemed resolute.
Melissa, to repay Mike, I'll help you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
No need to thank me.
Jake didn't live near us, so he offered to check in occasionally. He said he wanted to come into the house and observe Sarah's behavior. He made a clear plan about what he wanted to ask and decided to question her directly if they met face to face. From that day, I started seeing Jake walking around our neighborhood occasionally. For some reason, he wore a black cap and sunglasses, which looked a bit suspicious. I thought about telling him to stop, but he seemed so serious that I decided not to. A week passed since Jake started his investigation, but there was no progress. In fact, Jake said Sarah didn't even seem to notice his presence. She always left early in the morning, returned home during the day, then went out again. She came home around 9 p.m., and shortly after, the lights went out.
I'll keep watching for a while longer.
Adjusting his black cap, he looked determined. But after a few weeks, I stopped hearing from him. I wonder what happened to Jake. During this time, I tried looking for a part-time job with childcare and browsed vocational training brochures. But I didn't feel capable of doing any of them, and I kept sighing. I sold anything that might fetch a price, like children's clothes, toys, and picture books, to make ends meet. Even so, our savings kept dwindling, and life grew harder by the day. I finally reduced my meals to 1 a day and Sean's to 2. But even his meals were small, so he constantly asked for snacks.
Mom, can I have a snack?
We don't have any. I'm sorry. I always apologized because we couldn't afford snacks. We went to the park with empty stomachs, trying to distract ourselves by playing. But without proper meals, we soon became too weak and returned home quickly. We started going out less and less.
I'm hungry, Mom.
In the dim room at dusk, my son murmured. He had already eaten lunch, and we had no food left for dinner. With no money, I couldn't go to the store. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hugged Sean tightly, apologizing over and over. Then he shook off my arm and ran to the yard.
No, I'm hungry.
He picked up a stone and put it in his mouth. What are you doing? Stop it. I hurried to stop him, staggering as I stood up. I hadn't eaten properly for days, so I had no strength, but I had to act quickly before Sean ate the stone. I cursed my helplessness. It was my fault that my child was so hungry he tried to eat a stone. It was all my fault. I'm a failure as a mother. Overcome with self-blame, frustration, and sadness, I couldn't stop the tears. Stop. Please, Sean, stop. I grabbed his hand desperately, but what I saw was unbelievable. My son was happily munching on the stone.
Mom, this is chocolate. It's delicious.
On closer inspection, all the stones were made of chocolate, crafted to look like real stones. I picked one up and took a bite, and it was indeed chocolate. When I checked the pile of stones in the corner of the yard, they were all chocolate too. I can't believe it. It was like something out of a fairy tale, a house made of sweets. Sean was reaching for one chocolate after another, getting chocolate all over his face. I went back inside and grabbed a basket. I couldn't let the neighbors see my son eating stones in the yard. Sean and I filled the basket with chocolate stones and decided to eat them inside. Still, what's going on? The fact that Sarah had been throwing chocolate stones was baffling. I couldn't help but worry if they were poisoned. But so far, both Sean and I were fine. As I pondered, my smartphone rang. It was Jake. I quickly grabbed my phone and answered. Hello, Jake. Something strange is happening. The stones are chocolate, and Sean is eating them. I blurted out in a rush, but Jake was calm.
Calm down. I know about that.
What do you mean?
I'll explain. Actually, Sarah.
Jake explained the situation to me in detail. Sarah had been working 2 part-time jobs every day, from early morning till late at night. In the morning, she works at a restaurant and returns home around noon. After lunch, she changes her clothes and works at a call center, coming home around 9 p.m. She has been living this way for nearly a year. While my husband had been tough, I was surprised to learn that Sarah was too. Holding 2 part-time jobs without getting sick was a testament to her health. But why is Sarah working part-time?
I asked her that too.
You spoke to her directly?
Well, actually, she caught me following her.
I couldn't see his face, but I could sense from his voice that he was smiling wryly. If a man in a black cap and sunglasses were following me, I'd think it was suspicious too. So, I wasn't too surprised that she noticed. Sarah had caught Jake following her to work and confronted him. I had to admire her boldness, and I was even more surprised to learn she questioned him. Jake managed to dodge her questions and succeeded in getting some recent information.
I decided to talk to Sarah at a nearby family restaurant.
Once inside, he asked her,
Why are you working 2 part-time jobs? You don't seem to be struggling financially.
Sarah was neatly dressed, with makeup and her hair perfectly done. She snorted and replied quietly,
It's not for myself. I'm managing just fine.
Then why?
Sarah hesitated to answer that question. After a while, she finally spoke, a bit reluctantly.
It's for my son's wife's sake. I heard she can't work because of her weak health, so I'm working instead of her.
It turned out that Sarah had been working day and night, opening a bank account and saving money for us. Jake was astonished by her answer.
What? For a whole year? Does Melissa know about this?
She probably doesn't. But my grandson is going to need more money in the future, right? I want to help as much as I can.
I found it hard to believe that Sarah would say such a thing. However, it didn't explain everything. It didn't seem to explain why she was throwing stones, or rather, chocolates. I urged him to continue. Jake, sharing my curiosity, asked cautiously.
But according to Melissa, you've been throwing stones at their house.
When he said that, Sarah looked sad. Then she bowed her head apologetically and said,
I feel sorry for her, but I couldn't help it.
What do you mean?
I'm grieving. I don't know where to direct my sadness over losing my son.
So, to cope with your grief, you've been cold to Melissa and throwing stones.
Sarah simply answered, yes. Jake mentioned that Sarah seemed unable to accept Mike's death. Losing a beloved son is unimaginable for a mother. I felt my heart ache thinking about losing Sean before me.
She's the one my beloved son chose. I don't hate Melissa.
But Sarah couldn't let go of the idea that it wasn't the driver who took Mike's life, but his wife, Melissa.
I'm stubborn about strange things.
So, you threw stones at them because you hated them?
Hate them? Of course I do. But I didn't throw any stones.
It was just chocolate, Sarah said bluntly. She had noticed how Sean and I were visibly losing weight after Mike's death. So, she started buying chocolate that looked like stones from a candy store and threw them over. She did this near the end of the month because it was close to her payday.
I feel both hatred and love for them. It's complicated.
Sarah said this with a sad expression.
That's all I learned from her that day.
I see. Thank you so much. I was filled with disbelief. Sarah's outward hostility hid her inability to fully hate us. It was the epitome of love and hate. Hate and love might be two sides of the same coin. Her feelings manifested in throwing chocolates at us. I looked at Sean, who was still eating the chocolates. The basket was now half empty. It was clear that Sarah both hated and resented us, and at the same time, I understood that she gave us chocolate out of goodwill. However, I was also confused about whether it was right to continue such a complicated relationship. Is there any way to mend this relationship?
Well, it's not my place to say, but
Jake paused before continuing.
why don't we arrange a meeting between you and Sarah to reconcile?
I was deeply surprised and felt apologetic. No, this is between Sarah and me.
But you haven't resolved it so far. Maybe having someone mediate could help.
But
We're in this together. Please leave it to me.
thanks to Jake's arrangement, Sarah and I met face to face a few days later. The meeting place was our usual family restaurant, and the four of us sat in a booth. At first, the atmosphere was awkward, and neither Sarah nor I could make eye contact. I've heard everything from Jake, I said. Sarah turned away and responded with just a whom, as if she understood everything from that one sentence. Mike is not coming back. I understand that you're sad,
Do you really?
but if we keep fighting, won't that make Mike sad too? Sarah was taken aback by those words. She hadn't made eye contact with me until then, but now she stared at me. Sarah, let's end this complicated relationship. I looked back at her firmly and pleaded. For a while, neither of us said anything, but finally, Sarah relaxed her shoulders and spoke.
You're right. I was thinking the same thing.
Sarah deeply apologized for everything that had happened.
I'm sorry for treating you so harshly. I won't do it anymore.
And so, Sarah and I reconciled. Naturally, I was very happy and filled with joy. It wasn't just about not having stones thrown at me or not being yelled at anymore. It was the hope that we could rebuild our relationship, even if it wouldn't be like it was before. It's been about 6 months since then. My relationship with Sarah has improved significantly. Of course, there are no more piles of chocolate in the yard. Around that time, I started working as a housekeeper. After our conversation, Jake offered me a housekeeping job.
My new business is picking up, and I can't keep up with the housework. Of course, I'll pay you.
Well, I can handle housework.
You don't have to do it every day. Just 3 days a week, depending on your health.
Though I had been a stay-at-home mom due to my poor health, I was confident in my housekeeping skills. Since it was flexible, I decided to take the job. Jake's house was huge, almost like a mansion, and there were 2 other housekeepers. It turned out that my housekeeping skills were quite high, and the other housekeepers praised me. Encouraged by them, I registered with a housekeeping agency and accepted jobs within my limits. I received high praise from clients, with comments like, "The prepared dishes are delicious," and "The living room storage is now easier to organize." More clients started requesting me by name, but I still worked at Jake's place, so my availability was limited. Furthermore, in my case, it's difficult to work every time due to my health. There are days when I can't go out, so I've become known as a rare character. I became known as the legendary housekeeper in the community. Jake was pleased too, saying that my organization made it easier for him to focus on work. He said the bookshelves I organized made information easier to find at a glance. Being praised for my abilities made me happy and a bit bashful. I no longer have gaps in my work and have been able to earn a fairly stable income. Thanks to that, I can now provide Sean with delicious meals. We often invited Sarah over for meals too. Recently, Sean has become quite attached to his grandmother.
Grandma, look at this.
He played with a toy train Sarah had bought him, cherishing it dearly. Sarah, though saying she didn't understand, watched him with a delighted smile. I wonder if my husband is watching this happy scene from heaven. I believe he's smiling at this happiness too.